Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Prior to my lecture, I would like to draw your attention to the doctoral program of the Shemolam Institute. This program is a pioneer project designed to train, promote, and encourage young scholars, especially from Eastern Europe, not only, and to create the next generation of Holocaust scholars who will dedicate their scientific activities to the Holocaust, its background, its victims, and its perpetrators. The first group of 15 to 20 doctoral students will hopefully come to Shemolam on January 2018, a few months from now. We need your help, ladies and gentlemen, in distributing the idea among your friends and colleagues. Please help us to advertise the doctoral program. You can read all details in this leaflet. You can take it. The Holocaust studies need new researchers and new scholars. Shemolam sees this goal as a moral obligation to the millions of tortured, humiliated, and murdered Jews. Thanks to our library, archive, and skilled team, the doctoral candidates will get the utmost conditions for a fruitful work and fruitful research. We are certain that the program is essential for the sake of continuation of future scientific research of the Holocaust. Please take the leaflet and think how you can help us to help the Holocaust memory to become eternal. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of my lecture contains the problematic aspect of the subject embodied in its title. For many years, to be more precise, from 1948 to 1983, and even later, there was no Holocaust education in Israel. Surprising, isn't it? Yes, it is hard to believe. In the country where hundreds of thousands of Holocaust survivors lived and still live, the Holocaust was for a very long time non-existent. This vacuum has its good reasons. In a minute, I'm going to elaborate and explain them before you. However, the title of the lecture is in a way misleading, because there was for many years, for decades, the Holocaust was not part of the Israeli educational system. It was not legitimate, it was not part of the curricula, and was a taboo. This sounds amazing, surprising, even bizarre. Not at all. Taking into consideration all mental, psychological, social, and other serious obstacles that were part of the long process until the Holocaust was accepted and legitimized by the Israeli public and Israeli society. It lasted decades until the Holocaust lost its status of taboo and the rejection of the public and could penetrate through the open window of Israeli society. The road from being a deprived subject to an acceptable one was twisted, complicated, and even painful. The similarity between the general process concerning the awareness of the Holocaust and its becoming a legitimate part of the Israeli curricula was almost perfect. Total similarity. Please look at the screen. This picture represents the big change in 1961, the Eichmann trial, the Adolf Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. The change lasted for over 30 years with certain stages which I will mention in a minute. But this is no doubt the first stage in the big change. 1961, all Israelis with the little radio. We didn't have TV at that time. And I remember myself as a pupil in elementary school in the same condition in my school. In the first 13 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, the Holocaust was like a persona non grata in the open public life of Israeli society. As I mentioned, various reasons led to such non-natural, artificial, bizarre phenomenon, sometimes described in literature as the long years of silence. Among other reasons, I can mention, ladies and gentlemen, the fact that young Israel was fighting for its existence, being attacked in 1948 by 7 Arab countries, having to sacrifice over 6,000 soldiers in the first war of independence, which lasted almost 2 years, 1948 to 1949. Another reason was the horrible economical situation of the young state of Israel, standing before a potential economical disaster, almost collapse. The third reason was the collective sense of guilt, or almost collective sense of guilt, on behalf of many Israelis, based on their, so to say, passive attitude, indifference, and apathy regarding the fate of their brethren in Europe. I forgot to mention, if you have questions, please ask me during the lecture and not after. I prefer this way. The Holocaust education in Israel can therefore not be dealt without placing it within the bigger framework, which is the slow, complicated and twisted road which the Holocaust awareness of the Israelis moved forwards from 1948 onwards. The process of integrating the Holocaust in the curricula in Israel was therefore rather long, delicate and twisted, and is almost identical and moved parallel to the general process of the growth of the awareness and interest of the Holocaust within Israeli society. For more than a decade, the Holocaust was a neglected matter, a taboo, scarcely dealt in public life, mentioned explicitly only once a year on Yom HaShoah, the Memorial Day of Holocaust, celebrated on Kaf Zayin Benisan, day in which the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising started. In the 50s, 60s, and even 70s of the 20th century, the presence of the Holocaust in the cultural, social, and educational life in Israel was almost non-existent. Looking backwards, it was, of course, a bizarre, absurd, and odd situation. Only after decades and through a long perspective of time, we can now analyze the absence of the Holocaust from the daily life in Israel and understand it. I would like now to mention the most important steps or stations in the process which made the Holocaust more popular or accepted. As we see on the screen, the Adolf Eichmann trial conducted in Jerusalem 1961 to 1962. Second stage, I would mention the crisis in 1963, you may remember, realizing that Nazi rocket experts help Egypt to build a rocket industry against the state of Israel. Thanks God, this danger was prevented. Number 3, the waiting time in May 1967, the 4.5 weeks preceding the outbreak of the Six-Day War. Because of limits of time, I'm not elaborating on each and every point. Point number 4, the Yom Kippur War on October 1993. And point number 73, I'm sorry. Thank you, Moti. And point number 5, of course, not the last one, the murder of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin on November 1995 in Tel Aviv, and other major events. Our time limitations do not allow me, unfortunately, to elaborate on each of the mentioned points and to explain in which way they paved the way for the significant change in the Holocaust awareness in Israel. Maybe next time. As mentioned, the development of Holocaust education went on a parallel route to the general development. For many years, actually for 35 years, the Holocaust was simply missing from the curricula of Israeli education system, whole system. It was only in 1983, yes, I'm not mistaken, 1983, when for the first time it was introduced into high school program as an obligatory topic, totaling 30 yearly hours. Temporarily, in the 80s and 90s, pupils at elementary schools did not learn about the Holocaust at all. Not to mention religious and ultra-religious youngsters on one hand, and the Arab Israeli youngsters on the other hand. Yet, there was no textbook on the Holocaust existent at all when the government decided to make this topic obligatory. First textbook, written by Professor Chaim Schatzker, was published only in 1985. Unbelievable. Second textbook was written by Professor Israel Gutman, was published 1990. And the third, written by Professor Yehuda Bauer, was written 5 years later in 1995. Even today, not more than 5 textbooks on the Holocaust can be found. Regarding this low number, I can only assume that historians were frightened and scared to cope with such a huge topic, taking into consideration the moral and historical weight of the Holocaust. Only after the Holocaust has become part of the mainstream in Israeli identity and culture, education of the Holocaust also became, in quotes, normal in elementary and high schools, as well in universities. But the road for that integration was very, very long. However, the fear and concern lasted for 5 or 6 decades due to time, to lack of time and lack of perspective. And the fear that Holocaust will be gradually forgotten and be treated as one of many other tragedies in Jewish calendar. This, thanks God, did not happen. The most surprising phenomenon regarding the Holocaust education is the following, which we can see on the screen. The journeys to Poland, in which thousands of Israeli students, high school pupils participate. Since 1983, this project began in 1983, and despite its big success, it is a controversial topic until today. Let me give you one example. One of our previous ministers of education, Mrs. Shulamit Aloni, was explicitly against this project and tried to prevent it. However, she did not succeed, and the project goes on. It is not an obligatory project. Pupils or students who do not have the money for financing their participation, or their parents cannot assist them, are not obliged to take part. However, most of high school students take part and want to participate in the journeys to Poland, during which they visit the former ghettos and some of the 6 extermination camps on Polish soil.
But you know all the scandals about this.
Pardon?
I believe that you know all the scandals from there for Israeli students that are not behavior in normal way.
Well, as in life, we have to see everything in the right proportion. I think this does not represent the whole picture, only a small minority, thanks God. The most explicit criticism which was expressed against such journeys spoke about the strengthening of national sentiments or ultra-national sentiments, but even this, it seems to me, is not based, and according to my belief, the journeys to Poland will continue because they are considered a very important educational tool for youngsters and students as well. Other questions before I proceed? Even before the journeys to Poland started, the educational system integrated a very important change in its attitude towards Holocaust interpretation. Allow me to mention two very important aspects. One is the separation between the reaction of the masses of Jews, helpless Jews, towards their German tormentors, which were non-armed, in comparison to the minority which was able to fight back with guns, rifles, and hand grenades. The term heroism related only to the armed fighters, underground members, and combatants was replaced in the recent years. We at Shem Olam emphasized this aspect very clearly. Was replaced with the term in English translated to steadfastness or Amidah in Hebrew. The individual, non-armed fight for survival and for life has become valuable, respected, and adored. The change in such appreciation was also a long process. Nowadays, steadfastness is a distinguished pattern of reaction to the atrocities of the Germans and their helpers and collaborators. A second metamorphosis was the new interpretation of some phenomena which in the past were critically analyzed in black and white colors or tones. The new interpretation in the textbooks and in the media and curricula is much more sophisticated, multicolored, deep, and delicate. This new interpretation relates, for instance, to the question of Jewish councils, Judenrat, or in plural, Judenräte, okay? Their members and chairmans, Cherniakov, Rumkowski, etc. You know the names. And to all forms of the so-called Jewish functionaries, Funktionäre, like kapos, etc., and also to the so-called Jewish collaborators. These delicate matters are now part of the curricula in Israel and are no more dealt in black-white tones, taking into consideration facts and ingredients which were hidden or neglected for many years. As I mentioned, the most surprising educational development in the field of Holocaust education was the new educational project starting in '83, the Journeys to Poland, to the former ghettos and exterminations. Let us see some of the photos, typical from the last years.
Two minutes, please.
And since I have to shorten, I would like to elaborate on another educational development, which are the publications of which is the publication of new books, textbooks, scientific books, memoirs on the Holocaust. Hundreds of new books, new titles. You can see some of them on the screen. This is our publication, Shem Olam publication, written by a survivor from the Warsaw ghetto, Avram Karmi, and other books which help the pupils and students to write their thesis and other works. So we see a wave of developments which will continue in the years to come. And so from 1948, there is a very significant change. Allow me now to conclude. Although the term Holocaust education sounds as the most natural educational project in the Jewish land, I have indicated how painful, problematic, and sensible the process was, starting with the 15 years of silence, resulting with the attraction and even popularity, in the good sense of the word, of the Holocaust among youngest generations. A positive and promising process which, according to various science, will continue at least in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gideon. Thank you, Professor Greif.